Hey everyone, welcome to the WNP podcast. This is a show where a bunch of idiots discuss all things sports. From crazy predictions to juicy trade rumors, it's all for fun and for the love of the game. Thanks so much for stopping by, and as always, we're not professionals. Hello everyone, welcome to the WNP podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mitchelson. Joining me today, as usual, my co-host Chase Crawshaw. Chase, happy birthday. How has your birthday been so far?
It's, as I open up every other show, it's been pretty swell. I slept a pretty good amount, so got no complaints. Just had a PB&J and ready to record a pod.
Nice, getting some presents and cake, I assume, later tonight.
Oh, I hope so. I don't know. I don't know how loved I am.
Alrighty. Joining us today will be Alec and Graham. Alec, how are you today?
I am dandy.
Good, glad to hear. And Graham, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Great. Well, boys, we're going to be talking about the draft today. But first, before we do that, I've got a quick little thing. Not only today are we celebrating, the draft and what came of it, celebrating Chase's birthday, but we're also celebrating the end of the semester. So I thought I'd crack open a cold one, having some beers on the podcast today. So
cheers to that.
I'm not going to say the brand, not a sponsor. So if there's any beer that wants to sponsor the WNP podcast, you can hit me up. But we're going to have a good episode today. First, we got to talk a little bit of news because there was some big stuff that went down in the last week. Then we're going to talk about the draft, talk about some of the classes we like the best, some of them we don't like very much. We're not going to give grades to every single class because, let's be honest, every single news/sports platform has done that already. So you can just go check that out elsewhere. We're going to be talking about some teams that we think had a good enough offseason to either push them into that conversation of being a playoff contender, maybe push them into the conversation of really being a high elite Super Bowl contender, or maybe even falling down from a playoff contender down to, being one of the worst teams in the league. So that's really how this thing's going to pan out today. So first up, we got to talk a little bit of news. I think the biggest one to talk about right off the bat, Rob Gronkowski comes back to the NFL. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He got traded for a 4th-round pick. A 7th-round pick also went over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Tom Brady gets his favorite weapon back in Tampa Bay. How do you guys think it's going to work?
I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, Gronk's last season in the NFL was he was injured often and didn't have as big of a season as he had in previous years. But I think that the fact that they have so many weapons there, there's not going to be as much focus from the defense towards Gronk like there would have been, say, in his prime, or when the only other weapons available were like Danny Amendola or Julian Edelman, stuff like that. So I could see him having a decent season, but he is 31. He did say that he retired because of injuries, so it is a little bit scary, but I think I see it as more of a publicity stunt than really anything else. Just him trying to stay there with Tom Brady.
I think that he can finish in fantasy terms, I guess. Finishes at tight end 1, which is just top 12 fantasy tight end. It's pretty easy to do. He did his last season, which was one of his worst seasons in his career. So, if he can do it then when he's injured, as Alec mentioned, then shouldn't be any issues in Tampa. I think he'll be fine. Hopefully he's a good mentor for O.J. Howard, who is still really yet to ever get involved in that offense. They picked up the 5th-year option on the guy, so they're obviously trusting him. So hopefully Gronk can be a good mentor for O.J. Howard, learn a few things, and maybe they can have another great tight end duo like the Patriots did so many years ago.
And obviously Chase likes Gronk here because Chase just went out and traded for Gronkowski in our Dynasty Fantasy Football League.
Yes, he did, as well as moving up in the draft 3 spots.
Yeah, so Chase a little bit higher on Gronk than I am, per se. I don't think Gronk's going to be great. I think O.J. Howard's a better option, I'll be honest. He looks like he's in shape, but he's been partying nonstop, so you got to assume the endurance is down, and I just think there's way too many weapons for Brady to go to make Gronk as good as what everyone thinks Gronk is. So I think the Patriots did a nice thing there. They got rid of a guy who wouldn't play for them and got a 4th-round pick back for it. But specifically now, I want to look at the clip where Rob Gronkowski explained that he got traded to the Lions, but he said, "Nah, I'm retired." Graham, what are your thoughts on that one?
I it makes sense to me, honestly. Um, it's unfortunate being a Lions fan, hearing that kind of stuff, but the type of player he is, he's very he's very out there. He's vocal. He's not. He's the one player that really stands out in all those Patriot teams. That is like, he really just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would fit that system. But when you have that elite of a tight end, then you kind of can't. You don't want to get rid of him. I don't blame him for not wanting to come to the Lions. Those Lions teams and the Lions teams of recent have been not good, and it would have tarnished his record a bit. So it's sad, but it is what it is.
Gronk was on record saying that he will only ever play for Tom Brady, like play with Tom Brady. He'll never play with another quarterback. So it's not surprising that he declined that trade and why he is now playing in Tampa.
Yep, I agree with Chase. That's along the lines of what I was going to say as well.
All right, cool. Let's now move on to the next piece of news here. We got Jameis Winston signing with the New Orleans Saints. It's a one-year deal, $1.1 million deal with $3.4 million worth of incentives. So a big pay cut for Jameis Winston, obviously, going from the first overall pick, playing 5 years in Tampa, now out of Tampa Bay, over in New Orleans. But only a one-year deal. Who knows? He might leave afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty good signing, pretty good fit. So Jameis he's too turnover prone for a team like the Patriots, whereas like the Saints, Breeze was not throwing interceptions at all in his career, but Jameis can go to a place, he can sit behind a quarterback who is one of the best of all time, and just like, I know Jameis has been in the league for a few years, but he hasn't really had that ability to mentor off anybody, so he can kind of mentor off Breeze a little bit, just like understand the game at a different level, and then maybe next year he can step into that spotlight and maybe only throw 15 interceptions after his LASIK surgery instead of 30. But I think it's one of the better places for him to have gone.
I think that that this was a great move by the Saints, especially not retaining Teddy Bridgewater. And I think if Jameis can solve his interception problem, he is a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater. Because Teddy Bridgewater is more of a game manager, but Jameis Winston, if he can get his picks under control, he's the kind of guy that can go out there and win you football games. Like, he was the leader in passing yards last season, so that shows at least some talent. And yeah, he did have one of the most insane wide receiver duos in the NFL. And it is really helpful that he went from a great coach to another great coach. And so I think that Sean Payton is a really good a really good coach to nurture him. So I personally hope that he re-signs with the Saints after this season, even if Brees plays another year, because I think that this is a great landing spot for him. And he's definitely focusing on his future, which I really respect, instead of trying to get that starting job right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big fan of Jameis, and honestly, I think this LASIK surgery might actually have a bigger deal than most people are thinking. Like, I know it's a big joke out there right now, but I think it could actually play a big factor in his game. So I think Jameis actually should have deserved a starting job. I would have liked to seen him go, I don't know, to the Chargers or the Patriots, who have quarterbacks that obviously aren't the guy that are going to take you places, and Stidham and Tyrod. They're guys that, I mean, Stidham, who knows, he might be a potential starter in this league. He's young, but we haven't seen anything from him. Tyrod, I think everyone knows, he's a good veteran quarterback to sit behind for a couple games, but he's not going to be that top guy. He's not going to be a guy that leads you to playoff victories, and I think Jameis could do that, so I think he should have got a starting job. Although I do like the Saints hopping on the Jameis train right away. I mean, if another team did it and it turned out well for them, then they're going to be, kicking themselves. All right, next up, boys, let's talk about Andy Dalton, the franchise quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, played 9 years for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he has officially been released as of today. Field Yates puts out a tweet that says Andy Dalton finishes his Bengals career as the all-time leader in passing touchdowns with 204, second in passing yards with just over 31,500, most fourth quarter comebacks with 20, and game-winning drives with 24. He got 3 Pro Bowl nods as well and helped the Bengals dig themselves out of a deep, dark hole. Andy Dalton, a guy that I know y'all aren't big fans of, and he gets a lot of hate, but he had a great career, especially as a second-round pick, and it's sad as a Bengals fan to see him go, although I am excited for our new quarterback that'll be starting for us next year.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be excited for Joe Burrow. He's first overall pick in elite talent, Heisman winner, great season. Andy Dalton, he had a scale named after him called the Andy Dalton scale to decide if you were a good or bad quarterback. So this guy was the definition of mediocrity for the last few years. So makes sense that he finally got cut, and Joe Burrow now doesn't have to fight for a starting job. Like I think it was Adam Schefter tweeted out, Joe Burrow's been studying the playbook and has a chance to win the starting job. I think Joe Burrow's got that safe now.
I'm not as big of a hater on Andy Dalton as other people in our group. I loved watching him in his like borderline MVP season. I think he is one of the main reasons that AJ Green is well in more of Andy Dalton's prime. He's one of the reasons why AJ Green has had such an amazing career, and I was kind of hoping that he'd stay in Cincinnati for at least another year, just to kind of be there for Burrow and stuff. But now I think he's going to go to the Patriots, because I'm guessing that the Patriots are one of those teams that I saw a tweet that saying that the Bengals wanted too much for Dalton. And I think the Patriots may have been one of those teams that tried to trade for him. And when they saw how much they were asking, they were thinking like, oh, he'll be available either way. And I don't think anyone's going to trade for him. So I think they're going to go out and they're going to sign him, and he's going to be the starter this year in New England.
Yeah, I don't hate Andy Dalton at all. I mean, obviously, being a brother of the ginger heritage, I'm not allowed to. So, I have no idea where he's going to go. Obviously, I think most people lean towards the Patriots, as Alec was talking about. I think it's a good landing spot. Obviously, it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, dynasty of all time. So I think if you can get under Bill Belichick and put a cherry on the top of your career, he still has years left in him for sure. So I hope for the best for the guy. Don't know where he's gonna go, but I'd like to see a resurgence of the Red Rifle.
I personally think that Andy Dalton deserves a starting job more than Jameis at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I that's why like I said, the Patriots would be a great place for him. I kind of wish that maybe the Bengals weren't asking so much and that he got traded. It got traded to a team, and that team didn't end up drafting a quarterback or something like that. So he'd have like a guaranteed shot at starting. But since it's happened this way, there's not really many other places right now that he would start other than maybe New England. So I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think Andy Dalton does deserve another opportunity somewhere. I don't know if he'll be a starter right off the bat. There's been rumors that he may go to the Jags and compete with Gardner Minshew, who was decent in his rookie year. He was a later round rookie last year. So we could see him there. Could see him obviously with the Patriots, which would be cool. But as a Bengals fan, Andy Dalton was a pretty good quarterback for us over the last 9 years. He was the face of our franchise, and really, he was an even better guy than he was a football player. So it's going to be a hard loss for Cincinnati, but it was time to move on for the franchise, time to move on for Dalton himself. So hopefully Dalton gets another chance elsewhere. We wish him the best of luck, but we'll now move on and talk about the draft. We're going to talk about some of the classes we liked, some of the classes we disliked. We're not going to go through all 32 teams, so if we don't mention your team, apologies. But let's start off with a team that we absolutely hated their draft. Let's start with Alec.
My biggest one is, it's kind of a given. I feel like most people will have this team on their list, is the Green Bay Packers, without a doubt. And coming from a Lions fan, I'm very happy to see them do this. But the first 3 rounds, I drafted Jordan Love, AJ Dillon, and Josiah DeGuara, which I don't think any of those people are going to be immediate impact players, obviously, because Aaron Rodgers is still there. I think that AJ Dillon could get goal line work, but that's about it. And Josiah DeGuara, the tight end, I mean, he could get some work, but there's no immediate path to any playing time for any of these players. And there's actually a tweet that came out saying that it pretty much seems like Matt LaFleur is just spitting in Aaron Rodgers' face and saying, like, I'm done with your crap. Like, that's why we drafted him, because I'm trying. This is a power move. Like, I'm trying to show you that I'm the coach. You're not like the leader of this franchise. Like, I'm gonna be here long after you. And I respect it. I like Matt LaFleur as a coach, and one of the main reasons I don't like the Packers is because Aaron Rodgers is such a crap human being. And out of us four, I think I am the highest on Jordan Love. So it is kind of upsetting seeing him go to it like our division and most likely having to play against him in a few years. But their draft was just brutal overall, and I think every sports outlet has agreed that they had the worst draft out of any team in the NFL. And I don't know, like, but I do like the fact that Matt LaFleur is kind of standing up to Aaron Rodgers a little bit.
I'm excited to see us play against him. I can't wait for Jeff Okuda to get a handful of picks against him.
Yeah, it was really just terrible. I really don't get how you don't draft a receiver in the deepest receiver class that we've ever seen when you're a team like the Packers, who your option is Devontae Adams, and that's it. It blows my mind. But yet again, I'm not gonna complain the slightest bit. It makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a joke for the Packers not to go out and get a receiver. And the whole Matt LaFleur sticking it to Aaron Rodgers thing, that's just going to sour the relationship and sour the room. And I think not put them in the same position as they were last year on the brink of making it to a Super Bowl. So I think just overall a pretty bad offseason for the Packers as a whole. Maybe this helps them out in the future, but I mean, you guys were one game away from a Super Bowl. Why not try to add and push your team to that level for this upcoming season? So I think it's a little bit of a joke that Matt LaFleur did that. If this doesn't work out, obviously, and 2-3 years from now, you no longer have Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love isn't looking good, Matt LaFleur is out of a job. So a little disappointing for me when I'm just thinking of like competitiveness overall. I think this was the wrong move, and I agree with you, Alec. This was definitely one of the worst draft classes of the year. Let's now move on to another draft class we dislike. Chase or Graham, is there one you guys want to jump on right away?
I think that there was a pretty standout one. I had it at number 2 on my hated. It's probably, at the end of the day, it's probably not the second worst. And obviously, with all this draft talk, we don't know. All these players we have to give them time to pan out and see how they actually turn out. But I'm gonna go with the Eagles. You had Jalen Reagor at your first round pick at wide receiver when there's multiple better wide receivers on the board. Wide receiver is a nice pick to go there for the Eagles. But I don't think that Jalen Reagor was the guy. And then you go Jalen Hurts in the second. And honestly, I don't know why you would do that. Obviously Carson Wentz is an injury-prone quarterback, and you can feel pretty confident in saying that. But there's no need for him in the second when there's better quarterbacks available, first of all, and you have a quality starting quarterback. So you basically have 2 top picks, your first and your second round pick, almost wasted. Jalen Reagor might turn out to be something, but I mean, they did it last year with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who had a pretty bad year, and now they took Jalen Reagor. So I'm not confident in this draft at all, and I didn't like it personally. So I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I just not a fan.
I agree overall with that, but there is, just looking at like their draft overall, they did have 2 late round picks, which I personally like. Like, I like in the 6th round they picked Sean Bradley from Temple. I liked him a lot. I had like kind of hoped that the Lions would go and get him even in the 5th round, but and then they also got Quez Watkins from Southern Miss, the wide receiver. I think that was a good pick for them. I think he'll get some reps. So, like, yeah, Reagor, it was a reach, and Hurts is just kind of a dumb pick. But they did have 2 late-round picks that I think could make an impact on their team.
Yeah, bouncing off that real quick. I was reading a lot. Quez, I still don't know how to say his first name, whatever. But Watkins was one of the guys I was reading about quite a bit leading up to the draft as being one of the steals of the draft. This guy could be a legitimate, immediate impact and have a long, impactful NFL career. So if that works out for them, great. But if not, I don't think the other picks work out very well for them. So then this draft could be a pretty big flop.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly don't think a couple fifth round picks can make up for the reaches you had in the first 2 rounds. I think Jalen Reagor was a tremendous reach, like Graham was talking about. Jalen Hurts, I'm not really sure what you're doing. Carson Wentz is only 27. Sure, you help him out because he's got a little bit of injuries, but why not just go find someone in the free agency market rather than use a premium pick on a quarterback that I don't think many people are very sold on. So I didn't really understand it, but I digress. We'll move on from the Philadelphia Eagles. Chase, was there a draft in particular that you really disliked?
So there's two that I have in mind here. I'm going to lean with this one as they are another division opponent of the Detroit Lions. I thought the Chicago Bears did a terribly, terrible job. Not having your first round pick, you got to make your second round picks matter. And their first pick of the draft was Cole Kmet, who was maybe the best tight end in this horrible tight end class, a guy who's not going to be an immediate impact, might not even be a second-year impact player. So their first pick's automatically not an impact player. I like Jalen Johnson, but I don't think he's a day one impact starter. I think he needs a little bit of time. And then everybody after that, I think every other single pick is just, if they're lucky, going to be depth if they make their team. They really missed the ball not having a first-round pick. You got to capitalize, the best you can. There's just zero impact players is the issue, really, for me.
I definitely agree. They were also on my list. But I personally was really big on Jalen Johnson. I think that he has a shot to be the number 2 corner there in like a couple years. And I know that he had a really good draft profile. And so I personally like that pick, especially since it was more of some like mid-second, not early second, when I could have seen him going early second or even late first to a really cornered back desperate team. But overall, their draft, I agree, is just depth if the players even make the roster outside of Jalen Johnson and then obviously Cole Kmet.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a tough draft for the Bears. I wasn't a big fan of any of the tight ends that were available in this group. Cole Kmet, obviously the best one, but I honestly don't even see him making a huge impact in the first couple of years. So we'll see how the Bears draft pans out. There's 2 more drafts I wanted to hit on that were pretty bad, and really I'm just looking at the top 2 rounds here for the Seattle Seahawks. They took Jordan Brooks in the first round before Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen was available. Not sure why they did that. Jordan Brooks, I think, was graded around a second, third round talent. So interesting to see them go Jordan Brooks over Patrick Queen. So that's something I want to mention. Also in the 3rd round, Damian Lewis. A nice guard out of LSU, but Josh Jones was still there. Josh Jones was falling. He went 72, I believe, to the Cardinals. So they passed on him as well. Not really sure what the Seahawks were doing. And then the last team I wanted to mention, the Patriots. Why didn't you get a quarterback? Jacob Eason was out there. Jake Fromm were out there. They were both dropping tremendously. I think Eason was a 5th-round pick, and Fromm was either a late 5th or an early 6th. So I think the Patriots absolutely needed to get a quarterback. And then even a wide receiver. Your wide receiver room isn't incredibly deep. This draft class was incredibly deep at wide receiver. Those are 2 positions you could have used, and you didn't address either of those. So not really sure what the Patriots are doing.
I definitely agree that the Patriots should have gone receiver, but I do like they did have a couple solid picks, like Kyle Duggar. I thought like, oh, this is the most Patriots pick ever, like some dude from a school I've never even heard of. But I looked him up, and he looks like a Patriots player. He looks like the kind of guy like it could be like obviously not the Stephon Gilmore level, not like a defensive player of the year level, but like he could pan out and be like a poor man's Stephon Gilmore. And Josh Uche I really liked, but the fact that they took a tight end in the 3rd when there were so many good receivers still available.
2 tight ends in the 3rd.
Oh yeah, true. Like one right after the other. Like they took 2 tight ends who, one of them, Devin Asiasi or however you say it, which I think is a reach. Like there were amazing receivers still on the board. Like you really want to trust the tight end position that much when your best receiver is an aging Julian Edelman, and then outside of that, what? N'Keal Harry, who I like but isn't proven yet, and then after that, who do you have?
Yeah, that's fair. They definitely should have, attacked the quarterback and receiver slots. I don't think it's the end of the world that they didn't attack the quarterback slot. Just if they were going to take one, I thought they should have taken Jordan Love, try to get the highest talented guy, even though he's not the most ready, and I'm not that high on him. I think just drafting like a Fromm would be a chance to try to develop a guy, but it didn't feel like I feel like Fromm maybe can be a starter if you really need him to start at the highest, and that's really about it. So I get why. I guess I kind of get why they didn't really go quarterback, even though he was falling. But I really do like the two Michigan boys and Josh Uche and Michael Onwenu. I'm a huge fan of Anfernee Jennings there in the third round. I think it's really good value. And then also the offensive tackle Justin Herron out of Wake Forest. I think that's solid value for the sixth round. He'll be a rotational guy for them. So I don't think the draft was bad overall, but missing out on the key positions that are quarterback and wide receiver, it does hurt their grade. I'll give you that.
My big thing with the quarterback position is, like I said earlier, is I think I'm still convinced that they're going to go after Dalton, because I really think the Patriots are one of the teams that called the Bengals about trading for him and realized that they're asking for too much and that no team is going to give up that much for Dalton. So he will be available and will be released by the Bengals at some point. So that's my thinking on why they may not have gone a quarterback. But if they don't go out and get him, then I totally agree. Why didn't they draft a quarterback, especially when they could have gotten Eason or Fromm in the third round easily?
Yeah, that could be the case for sure. And I don't necessarily think the Patriots had a bad draft overall. Just their two biggest positions of need, they didn't fill. And then let's hear this stat real quick. They took a kicker at 159. Jake Fromm was still available. They could have had Jake Fromm. They went a kicker instead. So I think that's pretty hilarious. I mean, they might not like Jake Fromm, and that's definitely fine. But just from an outsider looking at Jake Fromm, he looks like what a Brady would be when Brady was coming out of college. So I'm not really sure why they would rather take a chance on a kicker over Jake Fromm, but that's definitely a big reason why I had to bring them up. Let's talk about some classes we like now. Graham, we haven't heard your voice in a little bit, so let's have you talk about a draft class you absolutely love first.
Well, obviously, I can go and say the Lions because I always love the Lions. But unfortunately, I have to go in a different direction and talk about a draft class that I really liked. But unfortunately, it's in the division. We talked about two teams in our division that had a bad draft class, but arguably the best draft in the league went to the Vikings, unfortunately. It's hard to have a bad draft class when you have 15 picks, 2 firsts, 3 fourths, and 4 sevenths. I mean, and then, a handful of other picks thrown in there. You got Justin Jefferson in the first to be instant wide receiver 2 behind Thielen. You got Gladney to fill arguably the team's biggest hole. And Ezra Cleveland fell into their laps, which was pretty nice. I think that in this draft, it being virtual, it being based on a lot of not being able to see them work out, I think having the most amount of picks helps with insurance. Like if one of your guys doesn't really pan out, hopefully you've taken someone else behind that can step up to the plate. So honestly, I think that it's really sucky that the Vikings in our division had probably the best draft. But from what we can tell, just from knowing the players and how their seasons went, and some at the combine, some about the pro days, it seems like they probably had the best by filling the most amount of holes on their team.
Yeah, that's very fair. And you talked about some of the earlier picks, and obviously tremendous value with those picks, tremendous players, immediate impact guys. But I want to talk about 3 late round guys that I really like. So 4th round or later, Troy Dye in the 4th, Josh Metellus in the 6th, Kenny Willekes in the 7th. I think all 3. I think Troy Dye could be an immediate impact type player. Josh Metellus, Kenny Willekes, I think maybe rotational start now and then eventually can develop into full-time pros. But I think they really hit on their late round picks, and when you can hit on the late round, that's when you're really succeeding in the draft. Obviously, they did really well in their first round picks too, so everything just came together perfectly for the Vikings, which really sucks because they were already probably the best team in the division. So this draft, it just seemed like the best teams happened to get richer.
I definitely agree with Chase about like the late round picks. I loved all three players that he mentioned, but another thing is like I feel like they had one of the worst off seasons before the draft. Like they had
Yeah,
no
that's fair.
no cap. They lost like two of their starting corners. They lost. So they didn't lose, but they traded Stephon Diggs. But they definitely hit a home run on this draft, and it's crazy to me that I was so down on the Vikings during free agency, thinking like, oh, they're going to be bottom of the division or they're going to be fighting for that number 3 spot. But now with this draft, it's just I think they're the best team in the NFC North. Even though I am a Lions fan, I do have a lot of faith in the Lions this year, but I think the Vikings are without a doubt the best team in the division right now.
Yep.
Very interesting. I 100% agree with the draft class overall just being absolutely phenomenal. Graham talked about how they had 15 picks. Right away, 8 names just stand right out to me right off the bat. Justin Jefferson, Jeff Gladney, Ezra Cleveland. Cameron Dantzler I like a lot as a third-round pick. Not a guy that's super athletic, but he's got very good ball skills. James Lynch and Troy Dye, both guys I was hoping for. With the Bengals selections, Chase talked about Josh Metellus. Kenny Willekes is a guy I really want to talk about. He does go to Michigan State. I go to Michigan State. And he's a guy that was said not to be athletic enough. Doesn't have the burst to get off. Stuff like that. But this dude is a worker. He's going to work his butt off day in and day out. And I could see him really being a long-time NFL player. Maybe not a stud starter, but definitely a guy that can be a rotational piece for you and help you out when it comes to getting to the passer. So Kenny Willekes in the 7th round, absolute steal in my mind. Vikings, very good overall draft. But let's now talk about another good overall draft. Chase, birthday boy, what was one of your favorites?
I mean, I think the best draft, and I think the Vikings were number 2, but I think the number 1 team takes this by a pretty good amount, and that is the Baltimore Ravens, who had really the draft of a lifetime for a team that was as close to being a Super Bowl team last year as they were. I know they got eliminated kind of early, but their dominance in the regular season just really showed the true talent level of their team, and they really didn't get worse in the offseason, too much or anything, and then they just improved the hell out of their team with this draft. I mean, Patrick Queen, the 28 spot is just ridiculous. It's tremendous value. My favorite linebacker in the draft doesn't even come close. J.K. Dobbins with the 23rd pick in the 2nd round when Cam Akers goes before him for whatever reason that is. Makes no sense to me. J.K. Dobbins is the perfect running back for that Ravens system. Getting Justin Madubuike in the 3rd round along with Devin Duvernay and Malik Harrison and Tyree Phillips all in the 3rd round. That's 4 tremendous value picks. And then later on in the draft, too, a 4th round pick I really liked was offensive guard Ben Bredesen out of Michigan. Every single pick that the Vikings made was not a reach. Every single player just happened to fall to them. They did not make one single reach pick. Every pick made sense. So they just had tremendous value picks from round 1 all the way to round 7.
I definitely agree. One player that I really liked in the later rounds was James Proche. I'm not sure how to say it. The wide receiver out of SMU. He's not really the type of player you would think would fit well in the Ravens offense, but I think that's the type of guy that they want to put alongside a guy like Devin Duvernay and Hollywood Brown and stuff like that, because he has it's his hands that make him a great player. It's not necessarily his speed or his get off like the other 2 guys. So I was a really great pick. I also agree. Ben Bredesen, I really liked. I don't think he's going to start for them right away because I think they already have a great offensive line. But both him and Tyree Phillips are going to be great rotational players and maybe even eventual starters. So I think that they really solidified their future in this draft, which their team is already insanely young aside from running back, which they touched on with J.K. Dobbins. So I agree that it's crazy to me that a team that already was so amazing in the regular season had hit such a home run on a draft and just solidified probably winning the NFC or AFC North for a while. Yeah.
Hey, calm down there. The Bengals might be able to take it. But yeah, I mean, the Ravens absolutely killed it. They added Calais Campbell in the offseason, then added one of my favorite D tackles in this draft, Justin Matabuke. It's tough because the rich keep getting richer, like you were saying, Chase. And it's going to be very annoying because Lamar Jackson's still on that rookie deal for at least 2 years. And then if they pick up his fifth-year option, which I don't see why they wouldn't, they got him for 3 more years to continue to build this team around a quarterback that has a rookie contract and has already won MVP. So absolutely crazy. I don't see the Ravens really stepping down in the AFC North for quite some time. But don't you worry, the Bengals will take that top spot very soon here. Alec, let's now talk about one of your favorite classes. Is there a class out there that you absolutely fell in love with?
There is one that I really like is the Dallas Cowboys, especially since they only had 7 overall picks, and they hit on almost every single one in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb at 17 is just nuts to me. I thought he was the best receiver in the draft. Definitely should have been the first receiver off the board, and that helped them immensely. And obviously Trayvon Diggs, I was higher on him than some of us. I know we talked about it on draft night. So I think that with the loss of Byron Jones, that's a really good pickup for them. And Neville Gallimore, he's someone that I wanted the Lions to take in round 2. I think he's going to be an immediate impact player on that defense. It was a 3rd-round pick. I think he's going to be a stud. And also in the 4th round with Tyler, I'm not sure how to say this last name.
Gosh.
Yeah, the center out of Wisconsin. I think that with them losing Travis Frederick, that is a great pickup for them. And also Bradley Anae in the 5th. That is amazing value for me. I liked him in 3rd or 4th round, but I know it's not necessarily a pressing need because I still have DeMarcus Lawrence, but you put Bradley and I opposite DeMarcus Lawrence, and I think that just makes that defense even better. The 2 picks that I don't really know much about are Reggie Robinson, the second from cornerback from Tulsa. Don't really know anything about him. And the quarterback they took in the 7th round from James Madison, Ben DiNucci. But outside of those 2, I think that they have home runs on all their picks.
Yeah, and like CeeDee Lamb wasn't necessarily a need, but when you're a team like the Cowboys, where like their probably top need really wasn't like the value at that spot, so they just took the best player on their board, and it's obviously just stupid value for a guy like that. And like Trevon Diggs, I didn't like as a first rounder personally because I thought he's just gonna maybe not have the highest ceiling and need a little more time to be ready. But as a second rounder, I think it is great value. And then I do want to talk about Bradley and I, who in the 5th round, I think is a tremendous low risk, high reward type player. He's got a lot of boom potential, does have a lot of bust potential, but in the 5th round, if a player busts, it's really not the end of the world. So to get him at that value, if he hits, the Cowboys are going to look like geniuses here.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the Cowboys draft. I think they absolutely hit it out of the park or out of the yacht because Jerry Jones was just chilling on his yacht, making the absolute perfect selections. For my favorite draft class, I think those 3 that we already mentioned are the top 3 in the whole class. And then there's a lot of other good draft classes out there. The Arizona Cardinals had a solid draft class. I think my Bengals had a good draft class. The Cleveland Browns, they had a good draft class as well. But the one team I want to hit on is the New York Jets. I think they had the perfect draft class to help Sam Darnold. In the 1st round, they pick up Mekhi Becton, a big tackle that is definitely going to help reinforce that line, help Sam Darnold back there. With their 2nd round pick, they go after Denzel Mims, one of my favorite wide receivers in the whole class, a bigger body guy, has a lot of explosiveness in his game. I think that he is a guy that'll help Sam Darnold a lot. Ashton Davis, another good pick, a safety out of Cal. I like him a lot. They got him in the 3rd round. And then you can also look at James Morgan, a quarterback, to come in and be a backup. LaMichael Pirine can help out a little bit if Le'Veon Bell's not doing great. And then the one I absolutely love is Bryce Hall out of Virginia, a guy with a lot of upside at the corner position. So I think the Jets did a phenomenal job in helping Sam Darnold in this draft class, and that's what they absolutely needed to do.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Jets, but I thought their classes were better, personally, so I didn't. The one player I did want to mention from the Jets was Bryce Hall in the 5th round. I think that is stupid value to get a corner who like he truly is like he's a talented corner. He's got a lot of potential. I think he can be a legit starting corner in the NFL. To get that in the 5th round is stupid value. And then James Morgan, I do like this guy. He wasn't someone I knew very much about. I started doing a little more research as the draft process started moving along, because like for whatever reason, scouts started falling in love with him, experts started falling in love with him, NFL executives did. So I did a little research, and he seems like a guy who, if anyone's going to be like a random late round quarterback to develop into a starter in this draft, it could be this guy. So maybe getting behind Darnold. If Darnold keeps struggling, he wasn't like really bad, but he had some struggles. If he can't figure it out, give James Morgan a shot. Maybe that works out for the Jets better. But regardless, the whole draft was very complete, and I do really look forward to seeing Denzel Mims be the number 1 receiver there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is the perfect class to see if Sam Darnold really will work out or not. They added a great weapon. They added a great piece to that offensive line as well. So if he can't do something now, then maybe it's time to get rid of him. But yeah, I think it's a good draft class. Not the best. I think those top 3 were obviously the top 3. But Alec, you wanted to talk about one more team and talk about some players that you like that they got.
Just real quick. I think an underrated draft class was the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think their 3 first picks, like their 2 first rounders and their 2nd round pick were all great. I think C.J. Henderson at 9 maybe been a tiny bit of a reach, but some people are saying that they had him above Okuda on their draft boards. But also Clavon Chason, getting him in the later 1st round was great. And then Laviska Shenault in the 2nd. I think that just absolutely bolsters their wide receiver room. But someone else I want to talk about is, just real quick, actually a Michigan State boy, Josiah Scott. I really like Josiah Scott, and I am a Michigan fan, but I did watch quite a few Michigan State games this last season. And I think he was a very underrated corner in this draft, so I think picking him up in the 4th round was a very solid pick.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Jaguars, arguably one of the worst off seasons before the draft, getting rid of Calais Campbell, AJ Bouye, and they obviously got rid of Jalen Ramsey during the season. We didn't really know what they were doing. It looked like they were just blowing the team up. They had a great draft class to rebound off of just that horrible offseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do. I assume that Henderson and Kayvon Chason jump into a big role right away. They still have Yannick Ngakoue, who I'm sure they'll get a pretty good amount of value for as he wants to be traded. So we'll have to wait and see what this Jags team has in store. But I think it's another long 4 or 5 years before we start to see the Jags come around again, which is super sad because they look like they're going to be one of the top teams for a couple years when they had a phenomenal defense back in 2017.
Indeed.
Definitely.
All right, guys, let's now move on to talk about a couple teams that we think either had the offseason of all time and is going to push them into those playoff ranks, or an offseason that just fell absolutely flat. This will include free agency as well as the draft. So, Graham, let's talk to you first. You can give me a team that you think had a phenomenal offseason or a team that you think had an absolutely terrible offseason. Does not matter. Give me a team that you think offseason has absolutely changed the look of the franchise.
Yeah, I think the easiest one to mention is the Arizona Cardinals. When you fleece the Texans out of DeAndre Hopkins, that makes for a pretty nice start to an offseason. I don't really, off the top of my head, I can't really name a ton of the other things that they did, but they also traded David Johnson. Got some value out of him. Obviously, it's a shame what happened to him, and I hope for the best for him, obviously, because he's a newly added piece to the Graham Weaver fantasy team. But other than that, yeah, I think that's probably the easiest thing to mention. The Cardinals have really bolstered that offense, and I think Kyler Murray is in for a great year upcoming.
I definitely agree. And someone else they added in the offseason that I really like is Jordan Phillips from the Bills, defensive lineman. I think he's going to start for them right away. And Cardinals were also my team, who I think is going to take like the next step, because they already had a decent defense, and I think adding Isaiah Simmons, Jordan Phillips to that defense is just going to make it even better, and their offense is just going to be so versatile and it's just completely revamped, and I'm definitely excited to watch the Cardinals this season.
Yeah, and Isaiah Simmons was a phenomenal pickup by them in the first round as well. They got Josh Jones also, who I think can start for them on that offensive line and help Kyler Murray out. Kyler Murray coming into his second year. Hopefully we can see some improvement out of him. But let's talk about another team now. Chase, we'll give it to you. Again, it does not matter. A team that either fell flat on their face or just had a phenomenal offseason that you think will be making a lot of moves in this upcoming season.
So the team that I wanted to highlight was on the flip side of the team that Graham mentioned, the Houston Texans. You trade DeAndre Hopkins. Why? You trade that much for David Johnson. Why? You paid Randall Cobb how much money? On top of not having a first-round pick. Sure, they got Ross Blacklock in the second round, and I think that's great value. The rest of their picks just are fine at best to me, don't really do much for me. So they had really one good move, I would say, in the offseason, and an abundance of terrible moves. The team only got worse. I don't know what the hell Bill O'Brien is doing. I don't know how he's still allowed to call the shots. He must just hate Deshaun Watson, but he's not allowed to trade him for some reason. So he's like, you know what? Let's just make all of his weapons just terrible, old, injury-prone, overpaid. Because that's what's going on. Like Brandon Cooks, injury-prone. David Johnson is coming off of multiple injuries. I don't know if I necessarily say injury-prone, but coming off of injuries and down seasons. Randall Cobb is one of the better receivers. That's a joke. What is the team doing? It's embarrassing.
I 100% agree with all that, and it hurts because Deshaun Watson is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL.
Same.
And I wanted him to have I thought that this next season, if they had a solid draft class and had some moves in free agency, that they could be a Super Bowl contender. Deshaun Watson could even be an MVP candidate. But that's just down the toilet. You are ruining your franchise quarterback and just throwing his career in the garbage. And why? They're not getting anything in return. Like, literally nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's super sad what the Texans are doing. I'm not really sure what... I mean, let's be honest. We all called for Bill O'Brien to be fired after he lost in the playoffs. They don't do that. And now he's screwed the whole franchise. So, not really sure what's happening there. Absolutely horrendous moves by the Texans. Alec, let's now talk about a team that you think had a good offseason or an absolutely horrible offseason.
I'm going to go with the Bengals. I mean...
Horrible offseason.
They go and spend so much money on free agents, and I love what they did. They completely turned around their franchise in 1 year, in my opinion. I don't necessarily think they're going to be an immediate playoff contender this year, but I also would not put it out of the realm of possibility, especially with playoffs expanding. You go out, you get your franchise quarterback. You go out and get the heir apparent to AJ Green with T. Higgins. You get DJ Reader to help bolster your D line, and just I'm not a huge Bengals fan like Mike, but they are one of my few favorite teams in the NFL, and I think that they are going to be a contender sooner rather than later, and I am just super excited to see them this year because that team is just completely turned over a new leaf. So,
you know, Alec, I'm very glad you said that because I didn't want to pick my own team. I just feel like that's a little cheap.
I purposely left them for you. But
yeah,
Alec had to take it.
That's fine. I wasn't going to pick my own team, but I absolutely agree. I love the moves that they did. I don't think they are a playoff contender this year. It could be possible, but the Browns and the Ravens both made tremendous offseason moves. I think they're going to be the top two teams. The Steelers are going to get back Big Ben, which that's going to make them better, and they were good last year with a second and third string quarterback, so I think it'll be a couple years, but I've got a lot of excitement for that team because we heard Mel Kiper and Pete Prisco come out and say within the next decade, they think they will see the Burrow and the Bengals in a Super Bowl. So very excited for that.
Yeah, I definitely would be too.
All right, so guys, one team I wanted to mention was the Indianapolis Colts. It's on the good side as they added DeForest Buckner, an absolute stud, through a trade with the San Francisco 49ers. They also add Phillip Rivers, an older quarterback that I would say is better than Jacoby Brissett right now. I think he had a lot of struggles with the offensive line over there in Los Angeles, and that really hampered his season last year. Much better line here in Indianapolis. They also go out and add Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, two weapons that are definitely going to help a weapon-deprived Indianapolis Colts team. And with the Houston Texans just having an awful offseason, I think the race for the AFC South is going to be between the Titans and the Colts. And I honestly think the Colts can do it. They've got a lot of young pieces. Darius Leonard and DeForest Buckner are going to be the heads of that defense. It's going to be a fun team to watch. Guys that are a team that had a lot of salary cap and really tried to use it. So I think it's going to be fun to watch the Colts.
This is honestly tough for me because, as the boys know, I am a very big Phillip Rivers truther. He is one of my favorite quarterbacks, but I am also a avid Titans fan. They are my second favorite team after the Lions, but
Loser.
Thanks. I think that the Colts have a really solid chance at making a deep playoff push this year. And I think that this is really the year that Phillip Rivers can solidify his legacy, because now that he has a great O-line, he has solid weapons, a great defense on the other side, and I think it's definitely, if he can take his team to the playoffs and not choke like he has in the past, then I think that Phillip Rivers will solidify his legacy and prove all the haters wrong and say and show that he really is a franchise and great quarterback. So I'm excited. I love this division now. But honestly, I'd be happy with either team coming out of that division.
Alrighty, yeah. So I'm glad we didn't do any talk of the Buccaneers or the Patriots, because I felt like that was a little too obvious. Obviously, the Buccaneers get better. Brennan and Tom Brady and Gronk had a decent little draft there to help out Brady, and then the Patriots, they lost everything basically. So tough for them, but that's going to do it for the episode. We're going to be doing a lot more football talk, as football really seems to be the only sport that things are actually moving around inside of. So a lot more football talk going to be coming. We're going to do some predictions for the upcoming season somewhat soon. It's not going to be next week or anything, but a lot more football talk to come. We want to thank you guys for coming out and listening. If you want to stay up to date with all that we do, you can follow us at WNP Sports Pod on Twitter. That's again at WNP Sports Pod on Twitter. We'll let you know what's happening. Just like today, we talked about how we're going to start recording, and the episode's going to be out later today, and that's exactly what's happening. So we'll keep you up to date over there. If you guys can, click that subscribe button, hit the bell to turn on notifications. Give us a like and give us a comment as well. Let us know what you guys think. Who did you guys think had the best draft class? Do you think it was the Baltimore Ravens, as Chase does, or do you think it's someone else? Let us know down there in the comments. Thanks again for coming out, guys, and as always, we're not professionals.